All right, ready to tackle something we all face. Anger.
It's kind of universal, right? But I think we could all use a little help understanding it.
Yeah.
And maybe even taming it a bit. So today we're diving deep into David J. Lieberman's book, Never Get Angry Again.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, I figured it'd be like our cheat sheet to figure out, why we get so heated sometimes and more importantly, what we can do to,
It's funny. Most of the advice out there about anger, it's all about how to keep it bottled up, right? Like how to suppress those feelings when they hit.
Yeah, just kind of grin and bear it, right?
Exactly. But Lieberman, he kind of turns that on its head. He's saying it's less about suppressing anger and more about shifting your whole perspective so those feelings don't even show up in the first place.
Okay, so this whole perspective thing, I got to admit, the way he compares this to like a kid with a broken toy that really hit home for me.
Yeah.
Like to that kid, it's the end of the world, their world.
Right. Total meltdown.
But as adults, we see the bigger picture. We know it's just a toy. Exactly. We have a broader view. And that's Lieberman's core point, really. Yeah. He says that anger often comes from this lack of perspective. Like when we're in the thick of it, we're just reacting emotionally instead of, thinking things through.
Oh, totally. It's like, have you ever been stuck in that crazy long checkout line at the grocery store?
Oh, tell me about it.
The cashier is moving in slow motion, the line's a mile long, and logically it's not a big deal, but in that moment, oh man, it feels apocalyptic.
And that's where Lieberman steps in. He's not just about, calming down when you're already fuming. He wants to give us the tools to have that wider perspective from the get-go.
Okay, so I'm all for that, but how do we actually do that? Like, it's one thing to say, get some perspective, but how do we shift our thinking in those heated moments?
Well, Lieberman, he breaks it down into these three internal forces we all have. The soul, the ego, and the body. They each have their own thing going on, and that's where the trouble starts.
Okay, so the soul's all about what's right. The ego wants to be right, and the body, it just wants to chill, avoid any discomfort. But how does that lead to, anger?
Think about it this way. When someone criticizes you or challenges what you believe or just makes you feel less than, who takes the hit? Your ego.
Ah, okay.
It's like that sense of being right is under attack, and anger is your defense mechanism.
So it's not even really about the other person then. It's how our ego is taking the situation.
Right, and if you already have low self-esteem, that just throws gasoline on the fire.
Oh, for sure. Like if you're already feeling insecure, even a tiny bit of criticism can feel like a major attack.
Exactly. Lieberman's point is that low self-esteem makes that whole ego-driven anger cycle even worse.
So someone who's already feeling down on themselves, they're going to react way more intensely because their ego's on high alert. That makes total sense. But it also makes me wonder, how do you escape that cycle? It feels like, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Low self-esteem leads to anger leads to more negativity, and so on.
Right. Vicious cycle. Well, that's where Lieberman brings in this idea of cognitive dissonance. It's basically that discomfort we feel when our actions don't match up with what we believe.
Oh, yeah. He uses the example of shopaholics, right?
Perfect example.
They know they shouldn't be spending so much, but they do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that clash between what they're doing and what they believe, it creates this inner tension.
Right. And that tension has got to go somewhere. So maybe we justify our bad behavior, or we just completely avoid the issue, or even worse, we double down on those actions, which of course just makes the problem worse. And guess what? All of those coping mechanisms, they can actually fuel even more anger.
So we're avoiding facing the music, dealing with that conflict inside, and instead we lash out, blame others, or find ways to just, make ourselves feel better in the moment. But then we're still trapped in that cycle.
Exactly. And the real problem, that disconnect between our actions and beliefs, it's still there.
Okay, so we've got this baggage insecurity, the need to be right, shame, all fueling our anger. But then Lieberman calls anger the illusion of control, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, it seems backwards at first.
Yeah.
But think about it. Anger gives you that burst of adrenaline. It makes you feel powerful, at least for a second. But does it really ever solve the problem?
Good point.
Be honest. Those times you've really lost your cool. Did it actually fix anything? Or did it just make things worse?
Yeah, I think more often than not, it just escalates things. Like anger gives you this fake sense of control, but in reality, it often just blows things up even more.
Exactly. So if anger is not the answer, what is? Lieberman's suggesting that instead of trying to control everything around us, which is impossible anyway, we need to turn inward, focus on what we can control.
Okay, so instead of trying to control people or situations, which never really works, we need to focus on our own reactions and choices. Got it. But what about those times when everything just feels like too much?
Yeah.
Lieberman talks about escapism, right? How that can backfire.
Oh, absolutely. He's really warning against constantly trying to escape reality, whether it's through distractions, addictions, anything that's just about chasing comfort. And he uses a really interesting example in modern society. We're surrounded by comfort more than ever before, right? But rates of depression are through the roof.
Yeah, that's true.
Why is that? Because comfort without meaning, it doesn't equal happiness. It can actually lead to more suffering.
It's like, you think binging Netflix all weekend is going to be so relaxing, but then you just end up feeling kind of empty afterward.
Exactly. It's that instant gratification without any substance.
Yeah.
And that's where meaning and purpose come in. Lieberman's argument is that finding meaning in your life, that's the key to overcoming anger and actually feeling truly happy.
So it's not about avoiding discomfort or just chasing, fleeting pleasures. It's about finding something deeper that gives your life meaning. Okay, I get that. But what does that actually look like? How do we, infuse our lives with meaning?
Well, he uses this great comparison. Imagine working tirelessly for a loved one versus working on something you totally resent. The effort might be the same, but the difference is in the meaning we attach to it. It's not just the activity itself. It's the why behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I know when I'm working on a project that I'm really passionate about, I can put in crazy hours and not even feel tired. But if I'm doing something I hate, even a small task feels like torture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes down to what truly matters to you, what lights you up. How can you bring more of that into your life, even in small ways?
And that kind of ties into another big idea, accepting reality, right? But it's not just about, putting up with things we don't like. It's about finding a real sense of peace with them.
Right. It's a deeper level of acceptance. Lieberman calls them planes of acceptance. It's not just tolerating something difficult. It's moving through those different levels of acceptance until you can actually embrace it as a chance to grow.
Okay, so instead of just gritting our teeth and bearing it, we can actually use those tough situations to learn and grow from them. But how do we even get to that point? It seems like a big jump to go from, this sucks, to, hey, this is an opportunity.
Well, he uses the example of a thief who steals some bread, right? In that moment, he might feel some relief. But then he's constantly living in fear of getting caught. True peace, for him, would come from accepting responsibility for what he did, even if it means facing the consequences.
So it's about owning our choices and recognizing that, yeah, we can't control everything that happens, but we can control how we respond to it. It's like that serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Exactly. It's about focusing our energy on what we can control, our choices, our actions, our reactions, instead of getting all worked up about things we can't.
Right on. And that actually leads us to something else, the past. We've been talking about accepting the present, but what about past hurts and resentments? How do we deal with those? Well, Lieberman says we should try to reframe them.
Reframe them. Yeah.
He uses the analogy of a book. Imagine you're reading a novel, right? And then the ending, it totally changes how you see the whole story. Reframing our past is like that. It lets us reinterpret those experiences and maybe even find new meaning where we used to just feel anger.
So instead of dwelling on those old hurts, replaying those painful memories over and over, we can choose to see them in a different light. Okay, that's interesting. But how do we actually do that? It's not always easy to just flip a switch and change our perspective, especially when it comes to really deep-seated stuff.
Oh, it's definitely a process, you're right. And it's not about denying the pain of the past at all. It's about choosing to see it in a new way. Maybe that difficult experience taught you something valuable. Maybe it made you stronger or even led you to where you are today.
I guess it's about shifting the focus from this happened to me to what did I learn from this? It's like taking control of the narrative in a way.
Exactly. You're rewriting the story.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't talk about letting go of anger without talking about forgiveness.
Right. Because it's true what they say. Holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
It hurts us more than anyone.
100%.
Forgiveness for ourselves and for others. It's absolutely crucial for emotional well-being. And Lieberman has this great line, holding on to guilt and shame, it doesn't make us noble, it just keeps us stuck in the past.
It's like we're punishing ourselves for old mistakes, even after we've learned from them and moved on.
Yeah, and there's actually a ton of research now showing the benefits of forgiveness. Less stress, less anxiety, even better physical health. It's not just a moral thing, it's a smart move for your well-being.
So it's not about condoning bad behavior or anything like that. It's about releasing ourselves from that burden of anger and resentment. But what about those people who just constantly push our buttons? How do we deal with the impossible people in our lives?
That's where setting boundaries comes in. Lieberman is all about establishing clear boundaries, especially with those people who seem to drain us or constantly disrespect our limits. He compares it to a fence and an alarm system protecting your property. We need those emotional boundaries, too, to protect our well-being.
So if there's someone in your life who's always negative or disrespectful or just plain draining, setting those boundaries is key, both for the relationship and for your own sanity. It's not about cutting them out, but about creating healthy guidelines for how you interact.
Yes, it's about protecting your own emotional space and making sure your interactions are respectful and, two-way. Now, all this talk about changing our thoughts and reactions and behaviors, it can feel a bit overwhelming, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, where do we even start?
Right, it's a lot. But Lieberman reminds us about the power of habit and neuroplasticity.
Our brains are amazing, aren't they? They can literally rewire themselves based on what we do and what we think.
It takes effort, of course. But we can break free from those old patterns and create new, healthier ones.
It's like learning to drive. At first, it feels impossible, but with practice, it becomes second nature.
Exactly. Anger management is the same way. The more we practice responding calmly and thoughtfully, the easier it gets. And Lieberman actually offers some really specific techniques we can use to, retrain our brains.
Let's hear him. One that seems super simple but powerful is deep breathing.
Deep breathing is amazing for calming down your nervous system when you're stressed. When we're angry or anxious, our breathing gets all shallow and fast. But if you consciously slow down and deepen your breath, you're basically telling your body, hey, it's okay to relax.
It's like a portable stress buster. Something you can do anywhere, anytime to calm those racing thoughts and all that tension. What about visualization? I've heard that can be really effective too.
Visualization is super powerful for mentally rehearsing how you want to react in a tough situation. By imagining yourself staying calm and handling it well, you're actually rewiring your brain to react differently in those moments when they actually happen.
So you're creating a mental blueprint for how you want to react. That way, when that situation pops up, you've already practiced how to deal with it gracefully.
Exactly. It's like running a mental simulation.
Yeah.
And then there's progressive muscle relaxation.
Oh, I've tried that before. It's where you tense and relax different muscle groups.
Right.
It's surprisingly effective for getting rid of all that physical tension.
Yeah, a lot of us hold tension in our bodies without even realizing it. This technique helps you become aware of those sensations so you can consciously let them go. And last but not least, there's gratitude journaling.
Oh, that's a good one. Such a simple practice, but it can really change your perspective. By focusing on what we're grateful for, we're training our brains to look for the good, which is like the perfect antidote to anger and negativity.
Exactly. You're cultivating a mindset of gratitude, which naturally pushes out those negative emotions. All of these techniques are about making those little, consistent shifts in our daily routines and thought patterns.
They're not like instant fixes, but more like tools we can use to gradually build up our, emotional resilience, our capacity for joy, I guess.
Right. It's like building mental muscle. The more you exercise those anger management muscles, the stronger they become.
And that brings us back to Lieberman's main point. It's not just about managing anger, it's about cultivating joy.
Exactly. He actually argues that the opposite of anger isn't calmness, it's joy.
Wow. I like that.
So the real question becomes, what brings you joy? How can you bring more of that into your life so it naturally pushes out the anger? That's where real lasting change comes from.
It's like we've been so focused on fixing what's wrong, trying to squash down anger, manage our reactions, that we've forgotten to, nourish the positive.
It's a big shift, for sure.
What if, instead of just trying to be less angry, we focused on being more joyful?
It's subtle, but it's powerful. And Lieberman's book really lays out the path. It's packed with practical strategies, real-life stories, and thought-provoking questions.
So it's not just about reading it and putting it on the shelf. It's about taking those ideas and actually using them. I'm curious, for you, what's one thing that's really resonated with you from all this?
What I find so interesting is this idea that anger is often a symptom of something deeper going on. Like it's
Yeah.
that warning light on your car's dashboard telling you something's off.
Uh-huh.
And instead of just trying to ignore that light,
Mhm.
you got to figure out what's causing it.
So it's not about pretending the anger isn't there. It's about using it as a clue to figure out what's really going on underneath.
Yes, maybe it's insecurity or lack of meaning or some unresolved hurt from your past. But by getting to the root of it, you can actually prevent the anger from showing up in the first place.
It's like treating the disease, not just the symptoms.
Exactly. And that's what makes Lieberman's approach so powerful, I think. It's not a quick fix. It's a whole guide to understanding and changing how we deal with anger.
And ultimately, it's about creating a life with more joy, more purpose, more fulfillment. I definitely encourage everyone listening to check out Never Get Angry Again and see what speaks to you. You might be surprised by what you learn about yourself and the power you have to create a more peaceful, joyful life.
Absolutely. And remember, every journey starts with a single step. What's one small thing you can do today to bring a little more joy into your life? Maybe it's spending time with people you love, or doing something you're passionate about, or just taking a moment to appreciate the good things you already have.
Great advice. Start small, keep at it, and watch those little changes grow into something bigger.
You got it.
So until next time, remember, the opposite of anger isn't calmness, it's joy.
Go find yours.
Go find yours.